Hey, this is Bill DeWeese with LongStrangeJourney coming at you from Palm Harbor, Florida. And as you can see, I'm here in the garage and not on the water, and been at the bench doing some work. When we're not fishing, we're thinking about fishing. And the challenge we have lately is all of the west coast of Florida, but the Nature Coast on down to Pinellas County, and is just been, we're on our second week of really high, annoyingly high winds. I did some fishing on foot this weekend and the water looks like chocolate milk. So we're gonna wait this out, but there's always things that we can be doing. And I like to take advantage of these high wind days or really nasty small craft advisory days to take care of some things. So the boat's pretty much all set, but it was time to take care of some reels. This is one of my principal reels types. And I've done a really short video in my history on the Curado DC and why this reel has a bit of a gotcha that you got to keep an eye out for. But having fished these reels for 3 years, I will tell you that it's well worth it to do the maintenance, and we're going to do that in this video, and double check and make sure that everything is in great shape and your reel is long-term performing. So about 6 years ago, when I got much more heavy into baitcaster fishing, I moved on to trying, with a goal of trying each of the flagship reels. So I started out with 2 of the flagship Inshore reels from Lew's. Then I moved on to the then brand new, which I kind of liked a lot, was the then brand new Pen Fathom Low Profile 200. A fantastic little reel, a workhorse of a reel. So in my progression, I had next in line was the Shimano line. So at the time, the flagship reel for Shimano was the Curado DC. And so that's what I started with, and I instantly fell in love. I now have 3 of these reels. I've kind of stopped buying any other reels. I really like this Curado DC. And I know if you search YouTube, you'll find a lot of buzz came out around this Curado DC. There's a lot of videos, the screamy little noise that it makes, and also whether or not it's truly backlash free, blah, blah, blah. You can go check out those videos. My point, this is a long-term review. I'm not interested in like a flash in the pan, oh, this reel is cool, it makes a nice noise, or it's truly backlash free or it's not backlash free. To me, that's irrelevant. What's really cool about this reel is 3 years in on 2 of these reels, and then I got this one you're looking at now is the Curado DC 200 that we're going to take apart today and go through a reel cleanup and maintenance and inspection. These things from day 1 to 3 years in, they are buttery smooth. They are consistently an elegant reel. They fight fish well, they cast different presentations well. So it's a very versatile reel that remains very elegant. I thought it might be interesting to try one and move on. I am stuck here. I love these things again. But we're going to go into the desk, to the bench. We're going to take this thing apart and we're going to go through an inspection. All right. So we moved over here to the bench and we're going to get started on this particular reel. Now it hasn't been too long since I've cleaned this reel. I check in on them pretty often, but the interval that I would recommend if you're using the Curado DC around saltwater is about 6 months. I have gone as long as 9 months and not seen any issues. But I do find that 6 months is a good interval to make sure that you're checking up. And usually within 6 months, you know, you've got some time to take a break and take a look at your reels. I can do all 3 of my Curados in one night, so it's pretty simple just to sit down, chill out, put some music on, and crank out, clean up on all the reels. Now, as far as tools go, it's real simple. Phillips screwdriver, tiny. You might need a couple of different sizes. This one size here, this is just basically Harbor Freight, nothing special. Can get all 3 of them. If you have a larger screwdriver set, you might need a smaller one for the tiny screw that we're going to get. One thing I will say, just because again, people have a lot of agita about taking a reel like this apart, especially they're looking at a $280 reel. They maybe would rather spend 50 bucks to have somebody else take a look at it. But, you know, again, the interval is about 6 to 9 months, so that could get expensive. It's better just to learn how to do it just as though you would maintain anything else. It's super simple and straightforward. It's nothing scary. But you might want to make sure you have the right tools to do that. But I want you, their tool requirements are super dirt simple. Just a Phillips screwdriver, and you'll need a nut driver or a small wrench or something to take the nut off. You can use pliers, but just be careful because everything here is aluminum, and it scratches super easy. You don't want your reel to look ugly because you've had some scratches just by using a simple quick pair of fishing pliers to take the nut off. It's better off to do something. I prefer a nut driver. So pretty much all you need. The other thing too is to remember that there's really no contents under pressure here. There's two springs in here that keep pressure against the pinion gear so it throws back when you bring up the spool release. But they're not under pressure by default. They're only under pressure when you have the spool release pressed. So when you open this up, it's not going to go boing everywhere, right? So that's good to know. And I wanted you to understand that so we don't have to worry about freaking out about it. Now, two things I do recommend on any fishing reel tune-up or breakdown or cleaning, and that is, one, use a surface that's going to absorb any bouncing parts. If you drop a screw or a spring, you want it to come to rest. You don't want it to bounce off on the floor and go underneath the refrigerator or something hideous like that, right? So I like this pad. I also have a piece of cowhide leather. I've used a simple towel. Anything that when you drop something, it's not going to bounce real hard forever like a marble or a super ball. It's actually going to be absorbed and it's going to just lay in its place. So I like this pad. It's worked out well. You can see it's all grimed up from just different activities and gun cleanings and all that kind of such. So just use something. Also, you can use an old cookie tray that's got a lip on the edge, put a towel on it, or even good old-fashioned paper towels. You just want to be able to capture any parts that were to drop and arrest them from bouncing all over the place. Secondly, when you take this apart, you want to lay your parts out in the order in which you disassemble them in sort of an exploded diagram view. That way, when you put them back together again, you're just reversing the snake back to the other end. That keeps it super simple. And an additional thing I would suggest, not exactly a third thing, but if it's your first time taking your reel apart, get out your mobile phone and take pictures along the way. Especially part arrangements when you first take the cover off. If you take a picture of it, you can see exactly whether or not you're putting it back together the way that it came apart. So taking ample mobile phone pictures is really good because you could just delete them when you're done. But you'll have them if you need them along the way in the project. So without further ado, we're going to take this DC 150 apart. I've already done a full teardown cleanup of the DC 200, when I'll show you the drag mod. I'll insert that video at the time that I take a look at this video, and you can see the difference in the drag mod. In that drag mod video, that reel is relatively clean, so I didn't disassemble it any further, but you probably will not have the drag mod unless you've paid extra to have somebody install it. But either way, we'll go through the whole process of teardown. We did in the 200, but we won't bore you with both. I'll just show the two differences. And we'll get started here. So we're going to start by simply removing the safety screw that prevents... I got the wrong screwdriver, right? No. There we go. Okay, so we got our screw. We're going to lay that out. We're going to lay our cap with it. And then we're going to take our screw, our end bolt off. Now, I said that there's no contents under pressure. I kind of lied. There's one minor thing you want to know. When you see that lifting like this, when I take that screw off, the cap nut off that holds that on, you will then take off and flip that over to make sure there is or isn't a washer. The washer in this case stayed with the drag spur, but sometimes it can stick to the bottom of the paddle handle. This is under a little bit of pressure. This is the drag star adjustment, and this is a spring that holds that off, and it will put a little bit of pressure, but it's not going to go flying across the room. But just know that when you take it apart, there's a spring underneath that's going to give it a little bit of outward pressure. Okay, now we're going to take, this should be relatively easy. Here we go. This is what presses down against the drag stack, against the cylinder that presses against the drag stack. Okay, you'll notice it's flat on the bottom and it's got the groove on the top. The groove is to seat the spring, okay? No big whoop. All right, we got a pair of washers. We have a tiny fine washer. And you can check these for salt. Sometimes they get salt. This is a 2-washer stack. And these are going to transfer the drag pressure into the drag plate. We got another fine washer here. Okay, and again, laying out in an exploded view fashion. And we're going to stop here. There is a bearing on a race inside of a seated area. It'll be easier to come out once we pop the cover off. So now we're going to take the spool brake knob off of the bearing. We can see we're good to go. We got a little bit of lubricant there, but this is good for cleaning. Excellent. All right. Okay, now we're going to come over here in our speed or magnetic speed adjustment knob. I usually keep this on 2 pretty much. Sometimes I'll change it if I'm really in a windy condition and I'm throwing something super light. But if you go all the way past 1, you'll see OPEN, open. And then that lets you bring out the cheek plate with the DC mechanism. And we're going to bring it over here. And then we're just going to slide our spool out. Okay. So now we've taken it down to where we got rid of our spool. We've got rid of our side plate. We can start inspecting this, but we're going to finish taking it apart. Now we're going to use our screwdriver. Again, these contents are not under spring pressure. You want to be careful nonetheless. And I lay these out in the order of the way that they would look. And there's one here on the inside. This is the only one that you can't get to until you take the spool out. See a little bit of salt build up on the pan head of that screw. Okay, we'll take care of that. That's on the right side. There's one really small one right here. And we're going to just give that a turn. This one can be tricky. You might need to work to find the exact screwdriver that's going to seat into that screw head. Maybe I haven't unscrewed it all the way. There it is. So again, top up. This one's going to go on the bottom, and we got one more right here. Oh, look. So that's that bearing that goes on the outer edge. So sometimes you have to press that out, sometimes you don't. That was the last in the bearing stack. Now, there is the cylinder, we'll get that later. The cylinder that goes through the pin bearings. Okay, back on the task. So we're going to take the last screw out. And looking at the screw head side up, this is going to go on the right, or the left, sorry. Okay, so those screws got a little bit of salt residue on them. We'll soak them in some vinegar here in a second. So now you got to be careful. Not under pressure, but you don't want to let it fall apart. Just give it a little bit of a wiggle. Now I'm going to set this down like this and just lift that right up. Ooh, we got some grime in here. I think that is actually pretty good. That's lubricant mainly, but there is some salt residue around the corner here that we're going to take care of. Okay, so this is Now let's go ahead and remember we're coming at it from this perspective. So these two posts which go into these two notches in the drag stack top washer, we're going to pop that out, set that down, and we're going to put that face side down. This reel's in pretty good shape. It's got some breaking down of the lubricant, so we'll take care of that. So enter into this our copious amounts of Q-tips. And okay, so this is the part that we're deeply interested in. This is the bridge, I think it's referred to as, and it's got two springs. Those springs hold that against the plate so that when you have spring pressure to keep the spool free, and then when you press this free spool button, it comes forward and spring pressure will push it back. But right now there's nothing on these. They go into those two little detent areas there. So for now, we're just going to lift this out. We're going to carefully, the pinion is rubbing up against the main gear. The pinion is rubbing against the main gear, but we're going to lift this out. You can do one of two things. You can lift the springs out separately. You can lift the plate off separately. This is what I like to do. Okay, there's the plate, and the pinion came out with it. Good amount of healthy amount of residual grease that we're going to take off and replace. But this just sits in there, and that rides up and down, coming off. And it just sits right down inside there. And right now that's all held together simply by the lubricant. Okay, and as you could see, this is where this reel differs from the 200 series that I'll show you right now. There's your drags. This, by the way, this reel is unique among my reels, so I want to be careful here. This reel has the drag clicker mod. So the other Curado DC 150s that I have, they don't have this drag clicker mod. Normally you would just have your drag washers here, but we have a modification that gives you the clicker when you catch a fish. It's great, got some great examples of that I'll show you here. That was a big red. But there's no way. Here he is. Oh, I got him. I got him. That's a good red. That's a good red. Oops. Oh, that's a tank. That's a farking tank. I can't turn him. Yes, dear. What a tank of a fish. Ooh, that's a loud noise. Good job, Mr. Curado. Way to go, Idaho. So unlike the 200, this one doesn't have the drag clicker mod. So the whole assembly can just be simply lifted off, and you could check the drag washers and the drag stack. Here they go. You can see everything in there. It's actually pretty clean. Don't see where salt has gotten in there. But again, you would now want to lay these out in the order in which you would put them back in. But from here, I don't really see a lot of craziness. There's a little bit of, okay, so we'll take care of that, actually. We will take care of that. Good deal. All right. So that's a part. We're not going to take the pin bearings out. I have taken the pin bearings out of various reels. It's fairly straightforward, but it is a little bit of a pain, but it's not a problematic thing to do. So we don't have any evidence that there's any problems with the anti-reverse or the zero reverse, so we're not going to take that out, okay? So we're going to start our cleanup process. We're going to do one of three things here, okay? We're going to take our, first off, let's talk lubricants, but we're going to go through a couple things here. Okay, so couple key lubricants, right? So we've got real grease. Grease is something that you're going to put onto a gear. I actually rub it all over the gear, light coating, just kind of massaging it. As you can see, it's got a little bit of everything. And really, I do that for water, preventing water from easily coming in contact with the surface of the metal. But grease is for slow-moving parts, gears, etc. Oil, and in my preference, actually, I do a lot with cleanse oil. Cleanse oil is going to be my principal oil, and you can use any kind of oil that is designed to work with high-speed bearings. I also have a Reel Clean that I use to break down. It's not really a hideous solvent. Pour a little bit more in here because I'm going to soak parts, right? Going to give some parts a little bit of a soak in here. And then thirdly, I'm going to pour in here to this third vat a little bit of vinegar. Okay? And vinegar I'm going to use to get rid of any of this telltale green buildup of what potentially could be corrosion. Some of this is simply a buildup on the grease itself. So I've got a washer on the underside that I'm going to lay. So this goes on the bottom, this goes on the top, then this goes on, and then there's a washer on the top, or drag washer here, which we're not going to take out. Okay, so I am going to reach for a handy dandy paper towel, wipe this excess grease off so we can get there's a little bit of a green has emerged on here. So we're going to put that in there and let the vinegar soften that up, and then we'll clean that up. What typically also goes into the vinegar is this part here. Now, let me explain what I did in the other little mini video about the Curado DC and what to watch for, and that is this pinion is brass. This is a brass pinion gear. It floats up through this system, this race system here, okay, through the bridge in this race system, and it comes in contact sometimes near enough with this other material here, this other metal. Anytime you have two dissimilar metals around salt water in a marine environment, you can get in trouble. So we're going to let those soak, and they're going to soak in the vinegar. They're going to take care of lifting up and making soft that green kind of like beginnings of corrosion while we do some cleanup here. So this is mostly retirable grease. It's not grime or dirt or anything, but we're going to come in here and we're going to clean that up. And we're going to replace it with new and better grease. But we're just making sure that everything comes out super clean. We're not doing a lot of real aggressive cleaning. We're not dropping this whole reel into a ultrasonic cleaner. I have taken some things and put into the ultrasonic cleaner, but we would definitely not be that aggressive. And you can see the salt. This is one of the drain holes. Well, drain holes let salt in as well as let water out. So we are going to go and get all of that grime out of there. Get a little bit of that crud cutter. I'll speed this process up. You don't need to see me do this. Okay, so we just really tripped the bail, the spool release. I put my finger over the mechanism so nothing can come out. I don't think it'll pop out anyway, but just cautiously putting my finger over the mechanism and bringing it back up. So now we pretty much clean. I'm going to pick up any excess with a dry Q-tip. Pick up any excess. There we go. So there, that looks super nice and clean now. We'll need to replace the lubricant, both the grease, and we'll cover the drag washers. And I have Shimano based Star drag grease, so you have a drag grease for the drag washers. Okay, and we're going to get to work on this underside. Now, this outer side, similar, the grease that we have put in order to keep the grease that we put in order to keep salt water from coming in contact unnecessarily or overly easy is got to be cleaned up a little bit, right? Some of this stuff looks like it's grubby, but it's actually grease that we put in under prior cleanings to make sure that we are making these more resistant to any water finding its way onto any of the parts. Where we don't, because water does get in here. You can see some of the salt water here on this edge where it's come through, seeped in. We don't dunk our reels, but we don't hold back when we're fishing, and sometimes we get spray from the gunnel of the boat. And you certainly get water from the saturated line accumulating in the fishing spool and making its way into your reel. It's not a waterproof reel. So we want to get in here. Again, this interval for me is about every 6 months. Alternating between a crud cutter and a dry Q-tip. This will come away super nice, ready to go. Now I'm going to take this crud cutter and I'm going to do a swipe or two on these pin bearings, sorry. And I used to just look to see, what am I pulling back? Most of these have been well sealed. So am I pulling back any grime? Not really. That's clean as a whistle. So we'll absorb as much of that crud cutter as we can and we'll replace it with the cleanse oil. All right. Gonna just mop up any excess crud cutter. Go around the lip of this thing. So there. Pretty as you please. All right, so the camera decided, the mobile phone camera decided it needed a nap. So we're going to pick up here with a full reassembly and with the other camera. So you actually can see here that what we've done is we've cleaned everything. We've lubed everything in barbecued ribs fashion. We have kind of mopped everything with a light coating of the grease for the surfaces that are metallic, or where we're worried that there might be some kind of salt water could come in contact. Salt water will get into this reel. We're not suggesting the reel will be waterproof or water resistant. It has exact areas for water to drain out, which allows water to drain in. You also have the braid going into the reel on every retrieve, saturating the spool, and it will get water in through the various ports of the reel. So we're not making it waterproof. We're actually just making it hard for water to light onto these surfaces, which would be a little bit more susceptible. So we just got a light coating of grease, right? The grease is going to just simply protect it from being coming into contact on a daily basis with water. It's going to be a little harder for water to get onto these surfaces. Okay, so like Chilton's manual for my 1980 Chevette said we're going to reverse the disassembly procedure. That's simply what we're going to do here to do the reassembly of the system. Okay, so I'm going to start with the order of operations that I had taken it apart. Each of these will fit in and sit and sync as they did before. We're going to start with our plate. We're going to start with our drag washer. We have well lubricated the back side of this, and this is coated in drag grease. This is the Shimano Star drag grease that we're using here, a little bit different than the pen reel grease or any other grease that you're using. We're using specifically a drag grease on the drag washer stack. Got a little extra, so we're just going to waste it here. Okay, awesome. Everything's nice and clean. Everything's nice and well lubricated. Gonna make sure that that slides, but that back side doesn't slide. Okay, good. And then now the top of the drag washer plate will go on. Now I want to point out something here. You'll see that that has two square holes on either side. The cylinder for the zero reverse gear is going to drop into those two holes. We don't want to put the cylinder in there now. You certainly could, but if I twist this over, it could fall back out, and we're going to play with the bridge. But I'll show you something you can do to keep that in the order in which it came out, and we'll put it in and we'll make sure we do it correctly. Okay, so setting that aside for a second, see how that lays over. We don't want these parts to come flying out of there. So what we have now is our bridge, I call it. There's an old school pin reel that referred to something similar to this as the bridge. But anyway, you've got this yoke assembly that goes around the pinion. The pinion is nice and clean. We have massaged our oil into the pinion, so just about every portion of the pinion gear is coated in grease. Going to set the two springs aside for just a second so we don't end up fighting with them. Everything else is in place. We have coated the surfaces of these two metals because they are a dissimilar metal. So the bottom plate down there and the two posts. And the pinion is going to go seated into the race of that interior. That yoke has to go into that skinny waist. Unlike me, it has a skinny waist. So we're going to put that on the post this time. There we go. Now the whole assembly. And now when we get through to the race and that drops in this time, there we go. The whole thing falls to the floor, but the pinion now can't go down in any further. The pinion can come forward, but it can't go down inside any further. All right, that pinion is going to mate with our shaft of our spool. Okay, so that's in there nicely. Now, all we need to do is lay these two springs onto their posts. The springs are lightly coated in grease, but that does not much matter. That's actually stainless on stainless. Or would appear to be stainless on stainless. Okay, so now we've got this super clean. We got that lubricated. We've got all the salt residue off both sides of these. We're super well lubricated. We got the drag washer stack. Everything's in place. Everything else goes on the crank or the knob for the spool brake. So we're going to put these together. We're going to keep it upright so the springs line up. Everything should fall together nicely. There we go. Now we're going to roll this over on its belly side up, and we are going to put our screws back in. We're not going to go final tight, but we want this assembly to be held together in tension. That's not the right screwdriver. We want this to be held in tension so we can mess around with things. You got one silver one. The silver one goes on the inside. Again, I would advise you to put these in the order in which you're going to contact them. And I would advise you, if it's your first time doing this, that you take a mobile phone picture of what screw goes into what location.
I've done this many times, so I know where the two odd duck screws go, and I know where the two same screws go. But if you don't, it would be wise to take a cell phone photograph of that. There we go. So we're going to seat that screw. Again, not trying to get final tight. We're just trying to hold this assembly together. The reel is now pretty much ready for final assembly. Bickety bam, there we go. Now notice I can turn the reel backwards. That's not good. But the zero reverse gear is not fully assembled yet. That's this castellated piece here that has these two notches. This is what's going to go in next. You can put that in ahead of time, but you have to worry about it falling out when you put the screws in. What's important here is we're going to put this in there, but it has to go into those two locations, right? So we're just going to set that down in there. Then we're going to set the bearing in here. It's probably not going to seat flush. We're going to put a little bit of pressure on it with our thumb, and we're going to turn this, and it's going to pop down in. See how that went from sticking out like a 1/16 of an inch to now being flush? And now look, I cannot turn backwards. I can turn the reel forward. I cannot turn the reel backwards. That tells you that your zero reverse gear is fallen into the two holes and everything is groovy. So that's good. Now we can start basically putting this reel back together again. I'm going to pick up my parts in the order that they are. I got a lot of grease, oil, residue on my hand. So I'm just going to like rub these things to make sure there's no salt, and it will transfer a little bit of that grease onto there. There's a couple of little washers that serve as spacers for the race of the bearings. Then there's washers that are a little bit larger. There's a stack of two. They transfer the drag pressure against the outer race of that bearing. Okay. Then we got another bushing. Again, just rubbing my fingers on these real quickly just to transfer a little oil, make sure there's no salt residue or anything. Okay. Now, getting persnickety here, you'll notice we've got our square drag pressure nut. You'll have a gap or groove on the front. That's for that spring. So we're going to put this in here. We're going to do it down finger tight. Now I'm going to show you one other trick. There we go. We're just finger tight. Still got the drag. Now I'm going to put this on here, but first I'm going to take my cleanse oil, just a little bit, and clean that threads, clean that out. Then I'm going to take my final little bit of grease. Oops, a little bit more than that, but not too much more than that. And I'm going to grease that nicely. That's a friction. There's a pad there, like a carbon pad type thing. Got to get this started. This can be a pain to put this on. Screw it down to where it covers that O-ring. This can be a pain because it interacts with and can conflict with the fingers of the star drag adjustment. Okay, so now we're going to put our spring into that groove. There's a matching groove on the end of this, and there's a big square area in there that outlines this. When you put this on, it's probably going to stick out a little bit, but when you get it to seat, it'll drop into place. Just keep turning it. Aha, there it goes. See, now it's down inside there. Now this is where I lied to you in the beginning. I'm going to turn it a little bit tighter. I'm going to put my finger, there we go. I'm going to put my finger, I'm putting my finger on the worm gear, a little bit of pressure, not a lot of pressure. I want to see the shoulder of that nut. There we go. See, now we're on there because we're now going to put our final bushing washer on there. We want that to fit on the shoulder of that outer portion so it sits in there, doesn't get crooked and give us grief when we put, okay, we're on. Now we're going to put this on, make sure that's clean. We're holding this under pressure. This is the one area I lied to you and I said there's no spring tension. There is spring tension here. Now, be careful. We don't want to cross thread this. It has a willingness to cross thread. It should go smoothly. Do not use a tool on this unless you're in the final tightening stage. Bickety bam. There you go. Like butter. Okay, like I said, you can see I've done some field repairs on this thing here, or used the pliers. It's not cool to use the pliers. It will scrape the aluminum and scrape the paint off the nut. Look at that, smooth as butter. Now we want to take our safety cap, make sure our hole is in alignment. It is not in alignment. Let's make a slight adjustment. See if we can get it in alignment. Should drop right in there. Okay, let's loosen it a little bit. 1/8 of a turn, 1/16 of a turn. There we go, drops right in. Okay, now we're going to put our final screw to protect that cap nut from backing out and losing your crank on the water like I did with my Zebco 33 as a kid. There we go. We're good to go. Drag tight, drag loose. Awesome sauce. All right, so we're literally done with the main scary part of the reel. The rest we're going to do here is super simple. We've got a bearing seat down at the very end. We're going to get a little cleanse oil and we're going to go down in there and just kind of drench that, make it clean, make it neat. Don't do much with this. This is the DC part, the DC digital cast control part of the reel. Don't do a lot here. Don't see any signs of corrosion or anything here. That's all good. The final thing we're going to do is we're going to hit this. All right, make sure that's got some. And when we get done here, before we put the spool in, we want to lubricate. Now you can do grease. I do this generously with cleanse oil or your lightweight bearing machine oil. Into that worm gear, onto the plate or the cylinder that rides on the worm gear and on the guide rod in there. We're good to go. I'm going to just inspect this. There's really not much you can do here. Just make sure that there's no buildup of grime. Okay, by doing this kind of inspection and playing with it, I'm actually working a little bit of the grease off my finger onto the shaft. I'm not one to get really super worked up over getting grease on my fishing line while I'm doing this. What I tend to do after I've done a reel service like this is I will take a piece of paper towel, I will take some Windex or equivalent, spray it till it's saturated, and then just pinch it around the braid and clean the last 50 yards or 25 yards of braid just to make sure. I don't think cleanse oil is super problematic, but certainly some of the oils, some of the oils and greases might turn a fish off. I'm still going to have my leader material. And I'm going to get this here. This is actually where a lot of noise gets made. Now the other thing too I want to do, find myself a little bit of grease. And in here, this is where that thumb release. Make sure that's lubricated. Make sure any excess lubrication is wiped off. I'm going to pop that back out because I did not really do the other side. And I want to do the other side. So I think there are grease conditions that would turn off fish. So I'm generous with the cleanse oil. I don't worry about the line. When I'm done, I clean the line with a little bit of inert cleaner, like a glass cleaner. just to make sure that you break down the oils that might have got in the line from this cleanup. I'm going to mop up any excess. Okay, so one thing I will say, which I absolutely love about their choice in the design process, is get that in there. I'm going to go back to 1. So I've got my open is open. I'm going to go from open to 1 to 2. Yeah. Okay. So we're done. When we get done, we will tune up this reel with the lure we put on it. This runs pretty light. Notice no clicker, like the nice 200 has the drag mod. This does not have the drag mod. This has a silent drag. Okay, so for all practical purposes, we are done. So I was saying here a second ago, but interrupted myself, as I am often wanted to do, often doing. Notice I haven't done anything with the paddles. You can lubricate these paddles, but one thing that you got to watch for in any reel, and one thing I'm super appreciative in terms of the Shimano Curado DC, is they resisted the temptation to enter into the bearing wars and put a bunch of bearings out here. Some of the reels that I've used, the Lose products, for example, are 8 and 10 bearing reels. There's bearings been put in here. Sorry, that's nonsense. Why would you want to put a bearing in the outer part of a reel in harm's way where your wet fingers are constantly going to be on it? I don't understand. I understand that, 10 bearings sounds way better than 8 bearings, which sounds way better than 6 bearings. But the bearings you need in these reels are involving the spool behavior, involving the keeping the shaft moving smoothly. You don't need bearings out here. Most of these can survive really well with Delrin or Teflon or any other bushing. You don't have any bearings out here, so you can put a dab of oil on here. You can lubricate this, but these are not going to give you any grief because they don't have bearings. I have really never taken any one of these paddles off to do anything for any of these reels that I've used for 2 to 3 years or more. So definitely like the fact that Shimano kept it simple, did not put in any 8 and 10 bearing setups here to make your life miserable in terms of long-term maintenance. I highly recommend the reel. So if you think of this as a review, as a teardown video, I don't care which way you think about it is. This has gone up with inflation, but it's also maintained a really good price point for a reel that you can versatilely use inshore, bass fishing, the both, just one reel to rule them all. Works out really nicely, and it's turned out to be a well-performing reel that's been well worth my investment in it.